Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist David Percy, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up first, we've got Heather's weather graphic, and we've got some winter weather advisories out and wind chill advisories for the central western Arctic coast until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for wind chills down 40 to 55 degrees below zero, with northeast winds gusting to 40 miles per hour. And those winds also could create some areas of blowing snow, reducing visibilities to less than a half mile at times. Again, that's out for tonight until 6 a.m. on Tuesday. And then here along the northwest coast, high wind warning out here along the Chukchi Sea coastline there, mostly north of Kivalina, so not actually including the Shishmaref area down here on the northern Seward Peninsula. And that's for northeast winds gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour. Also this warning out until, 6 a.m. So overnight tonight until 6 a.m. Tuesday. And then for St. Lawrence Island, there's a winter storm warning out until noon on Tuesday. Northeast winds, same sort of thing here, gusting to 60 miles an hour, Tin City and on down towards St. Lawrence Island. That could create whiteout conditions with visibilities less than a quarter mile at times, snow and blowing snow through that area. That about wraps it up for watches, warnings, advisories. So moving on to satellite imagery, see a band of clouds, kind of a weakening front up here through the central interior, kind of breaks up over the southeast interior as it trails on down into the northern panhandle areas. Another trough right through here, another band, kind of broken band again. You can see shifting north and northwestward. The main low here around Kodiak Island area, and then some areas of clouds, south central Alaska, and less of that, but into the Kuskokwim Valley and eastern eastern Yukon Kuskokwim Delta area, and then kind of a swirling area out here north of the Pribilof Islands. That's another low center there, pulling westward there, and then some systems here moving eastward down here. Another development right in that area be coming up later on tonight. Pulling this through again, you can see starting to develop a little bit here, take a turn to the north. That'll continue through the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow. On today's map, there's roughly the location of that front, and most of the strongest winds are to the north and to the west of that feature, with the gusts to about 35 miles an hour St. Lawrence Island area, and even higher gusts up here along the western Capes. Point Hope had a peak wind gust of 60 miles an hour today, while Tin City had winds gusting to 50 miles an hour, and that, of course, putting the wind chills down to 45 to 55 degrees below zero here into the western Arctic coast, even the central Arctic coast as well. Actual air temperatures down into the 25 to 30 below range there to go along with those gusty wind conditions there. Otherwise, winds across the Seward Peninsula area, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, gusting anywhere from 35 to 50 miles an hour today. Less wind here, again, south of the front. Winds much lighter, but areas of light snow shower associated with this low that, again, is pulling westward there into the eastern Bering Sea. And another push of cold air coming down, kind of mixed rain and snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula, and about the same thing for the Alaska Peninsula there, temperatures in the lower to mid-30s this afternoon, and then rain up along mainly the heaviest rainfall here with this low just south of Sitkinak Island. On the east side of Kodiak Island, another system out here bringing some snow showers into the western Aleutians. And then this remnants of this front brought some areas of light rain, anywhere from just a few hundredths of an inch to maybe a tenth of an inch across the southeast coast. And although a little bit heavier, Haynes picked up anywhere from from a couple inches of snow in the Haines area there. Wet snow today at temperatures into the lower to mid 30s, and then some light rain and showers along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, generally cloudy here over southern Alaska. And for tonight, here's that next system pulls northward. That'll increase some wind and rain along the southern panhandle later tonight with lighter amounts of precipitation up to the north. Rain and snow or rain and snow showers continue for the North Gulf Coast associated with this trough boundary there. And then areas of light rain or snow for Kodiak Island with less wind coming down, becoming rather light with that low center pulling back toward the east coast of the island. Not much gradient there. And then we still have a low center here, kind of another development. The first one pulling westward weakens into this trough. This one sets up right over Kuskokwim Bay. Snow showers with that over the southwest interior. And again, winter storm warning, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. Wind chill advisories, western Arctic coast there, and the northwest coast with a high wind warning. Of course, blowing snow all in those areas. And then moving on to the forecast for Tuesday. That low center actually pulls northwestward tomorrow along the coastline, stays off the coast, so that holds a front near or just off the coast. The periods of rain, moderate, maybe even briefly heavy at times for the southern coast, Prince of Wales Island area, and rain and snow up to the north there. That tapering off to some rain and snow showers as you get back toward Prince William Sound. Should be a dry day for much of the Kenai Peninsula, Mananuska-Susitna Valley areas, especially in the afternoon. Just isolated snow showers over the eastern Alaska range. Improving conditions back here from St. Lawrence Island all the way to the western Arctic coast. Slowly diminishing winds there, and areas of light snow and snow showers from the northern interior valleys. A little bit more widespread in the Brooks Range on out toward the Arctic coast. And then some snow showers for the Pribilofs and snow right down to sea level. Light snow here for the Alaska Peninsula area. And then another system you can see kind of off the chart there, we'll see on Wednesday, that tracks northeastward and may bring a little bit of moisture into the central Aleutians, but that'll pull off to the northeast and bring some heavier wind and rain or snow likely here with the actually snow into the cold air with the main warm air down here south of the occluded front. And then it'll start to bear down on Kodiak Island in the afternoon with increasing winds, rain, and snow there, especially tomorrow or Wednesday evening hours. Otherwise, cold air back in over the Bering Sea to the Aleutians, so clouds, widespread areas of light snow and snow showers across this area. St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, all of the Aleutian chain, especially out here near that 983 millibar low, probably quite an area of steady light snow there from Kiska Island westward to Shimianatu. Up over the interior, about the same, mostly cloudy skies, areas of light snow showers and light snow, all the way up to the Arctic coast, but much lighter winds in through here, St. Lawrence Island and the western Arctic coastal areas, and pretty light here for the east side there. And this front, or trough now, areas of light rain and snow for the Panhandle, rain or snow showers for the North Gulf Coast, and maybe a chance of some moisture into Cook Inlet, Mananuska-Susitna Valley, but it looks pretty light at this point if it does materialize at all. Otherwise, look for some clearing there over the southwest interior. Next front here, again pushing up another round into Kodiak Island. Actually, this low center will eventually track up and slow down and set up over Kodiak Island, and that'll put back to that southeast milder flow into southern Alaska and the North Gulf Coast later in the week. Otherwise, lows tonight, upper 20s around Haines to mid to upper 30s down to the south near zero in the Copper River Basin, teens and 20s south central Alaska, 0 to 10 below in the Kuskokwim Valley, 20s for Bristol Bay, right around freezing for Kodiak, mid-30s for the high Kodiak Island, mid to upper 20s south central Alaska, call 33 for Seldovia and Homer, 35 for Seward, 31 Valdez, single numbers there in the Kuskokwim Valley, Copper River Basin, and lower 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Upper 20s to lower 30s here, northern Panhandle, mid-30s to the south, 5 to 15 below Kuskokwim Valley, Copper River Basin, teens to near 20 south central Alaska, followed by highs in the 40s for the Panhandle, cooler in the north, a little above zero Copper River Basin, staying below zero in the Kuskokwim Valley, and 20 south central Alaska, near 40 for Kodiak Island. below zero tonight. Northern central interior, coldest back here in the northwest, western north slope areas down in the minus 20s for the overnight lows. And then highs below zero, St. Lawrence Island, 0 to 5 central interior, and 0 to 10 above for the highs for the north slope and the Arctic coast. And again, below zero conditions over this northern central interior to the Arctic coast on Wednesday morning, followed by highs right around zero, either side of zero, depending on your location there. And then out to the southwest coast, teens, lower teens tonight for the southwest coast, 20s elsewhere, eastern Aleutians lower 30s, highs mid-20s for the Pribilofs, mid-30s central Aleutians, lows in the upper 20s the following morning.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, got some IFR here out over the northern Bering Sea, up along the Yukon Delta coast, right up in toward the Bering Strait. Another zone here around Kotzebue, or near Kotzebue, actually over Selawik Valley, northeast there, into the Brooks Range, covering the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. Pretty good VFR here over the eastern interior, some marginal VFR over toward the border, and then marginal VFR south and east of the Alaska Range into Cook Inlet, some IFR, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, some areas of VFR over the Aleutians, southern Bering Sea, especially Adak and Atka. IFR here, eastern Kenai Peninsula, southern Prince William Sound, right in across the southern two-thirds of the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, IFR again across the Gulf of Alaska, pulling out of Prince William Sound, south of the Kenai Peninsula now, and some areas lingering over Kodiak Island, but Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle, solid IFR there. Big area of VFR breaking out over the central interior, extending on down into the Susitna, Matanuska Valley, Prince William Sound, and northern Cook Inlet. IFR here over the northeast Bering Sea, in across the Yukon Delta, down to the southwest mountains, and then up here to the north over the North Slope Arctic coast, down in toward Kotzebue and Buckland. And for the Wednesday morning time frame, we've got IFR here, central western Arctic coast, marginal VFR, north slope across the Brooks Range into the Yukon Flats. All the eastern interior here looks pretty marginal for Wednesday morning. And then an area of VFR in the central interior, as well as the Seward Peninsula. More IFR, Yukon Delta, Nunivak Island. Pretty good conditions here, basically for the Bering Sea, with some IFR or VFR here over the central and south central areas, and then a system just scooting up south of the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, spreading IFR right up to the south coast of the eastern Aleutian areas, marginal VFR into the Alaska Peninsula. Not too bad for Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Matanuska Susitna Valley, IFR North Gulf Coast, down across most of the Panhandle for the afternoon. Marginal VFR for the southeast coast, narrow band IFR right along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, Passage Canal, Whittier, maybe Portage. Otherwise, south and east of the Alaska Range here, south central Alaska, pretty marginal. And IFR with that system down in here, sliding northeastward now, southeast flow, spreading IFR northward throughout the day across Kodiak Island. And again, not too bad over the Bering Sea, just some areas of marginal VFR, pretty solid here over the northern areas. And then the next batch of IFR at the next system coming into Shimianat 2. Pretty good over the interior. VFR with a little bit of marginal VFR, especially here in the west and along the Brooks Range. Passes for Anatuvik, IFR tomorrow, and marginal for Adigan. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, both passes there. VFR looking good for rainy, windy VFR. Isabel, VFR at times, either approach. And for Mentesta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. And Portage, VFR, either approach tomorrow, coming down on the next day, though, for Wednesday. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to start early on, then becoming pretty good IFR late morning, definitely through the afternoon. Freezing levels at the surface, southern Bering Sea, just south of the Pribilofs again, and then right up along the North Gulf Coast and across the northern Panhandle down toward the eastern border. And looking at icing, we've got with that front pressing into the southeast coast there, and then that flow wrapping back around, we've got some areas of considerable moderate rime icing, freezing level to 12,000 feet over the Gulf of Alaska and across across the southeast coast there. Pretty good. Mostly, call it icing free over the remainder of interior Alaska. Nothing very significant. And then that next system here, sliding east-northeast, may nudge some icing threats up toward the AKwx area, and then a little bit more extensive the next day on Wednesday for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And jet stream, westerlies, 135 knots here right across the eastern Aleutians, just south of the Alaska Peninsula. Dives southeastward, returns from the south-southeast, 90 knots over the northern panhandle. 9,000 feet, southerlies, 40 knots or so, 30 to 40 knots southeast coast, 40 to 45 southern Bering Sea here across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, 3,000-foot winds. East 45, small area there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, and 55-knot north-northeast there for the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. Turbulence, moderate turbulence here, North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, Western Brooks Range, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, and St. Lawrence Island.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, you know, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but, you know, since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show. How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a creature, would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow, a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white. And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. You know, visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savoonga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there. Visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but it has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who were trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert.
Okay.
There's a great image of this same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska, and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska Weather Facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Moving into the marine forecast now. South winds 30 to 35 knots there for the south coast of the Panhandle. Seas 16 to 18 feet. And then good gales up here on the north coast. East to southeast winds at 40 knots with seas 20 to 23 feet. And for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, northerly winds at about 20. And then swinging around southeast 30 for Stevens Passage with gusts as high as 45 knots. Gale warnings for Clarence Strait, southeast winds 35 knots with 13-foot seas. And for Wednesday, along the south coast, west-southwest winds 30 knots and 30 to 35 knot winds out of the south for the north coast. Seas running 12 to 15 feet. And small craft advisories for Clarence Strait, winds coming down to 25 knots, but still from the southeast and the central northern inside waters. Southeast winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Prince William Sound for Tuesday. Winds out of the northeast at 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And the North Gulf Coast looking at east winds 20 to 30 knots. Cook Inlet northeast at 20. Barren Islands, not too bad there. Variable at 15, but Kamishak Bay, small craft advisors for northeast winds 25 knots. And for Wednesday, Barren Islands, east winds 30 knots, northeast 25 for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet. Prince William Sound, northeast winds 15 knots, and for the North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds at 30 knots with seas about 14 feet. Kodiak Island, variable to northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, west winds 20 knots for the Bristol Bay area. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, west winds 25 to 30 knots. And for the day on Wednesday, Kodiak Island, East to southeast winds, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 12 feet. And northeast winds, 35 knots on the south coast of the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea side, northeast at 30. Same thing for Bristol Bay, northeast winds, 30 knots, but the seas here a little lower, about 6 feet as opposed to 12 feet farther to the southwest. And for the eastern Aleutians, for Tuesday, west winds, 20 to 25 knots, seas running 9 to 14 feet. Adak and Apka, variable to southwest winds, 20 to 25 knots, and then west winds, 25 knots here from Kiska to Shemya. And for the day on Wednesday, western Aleutians, northwest winds, 30 knots, seas 15 to 19 feet, and north to northwest winds, 25 to 30 knots there for the central Aleutians, and gale warnings here for the Fox Islands. North winds, 30 to 40 knots with seas 10 to 17 feet. And for the southwest coast for tomorrow, north to northwest winds here, 20 to 25 knots. Gale warning, St. Lawrence Island, north winds sustained at 40 knots, north winds 30 knots, St. Matthew Island, northwest 25 for the Pribilofs with 8-foot seas. And for the day on Wednesday, north winds 20 knots for St. Paul and St. George, and 30 knot northeast winds here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, Yukon Delta, northwest at 30 knots, north winds 20 knots for St. Lawrence Island, 25 knot winds for St. Matthew Island, and light winds there in Norton Sound out of the north at about 10. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow, Tuesday, east to northeast winds, 20 to 25 knots. First wind advisories also for the central and western Arctic coast, northeast 25 and 30 knot winds here for the western Capes, and then the Chukchi Sea north at 35. Good for gale warning. And those swing around to the west, fall off to 20 knots here for the Chukchi Sea. Otherwise, brisk wind advisories for the central and western Arctic coast, northeast 25 to 30 knots. Lighter winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast at about 15 to 20 knots. For tonight, wind chill advisories continue tonight until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for the western Arctic coast. High wind warning until for tonight from the northwest coast to the north side of the Seward Peninsula for those northeast winds gusting over 60 miles an hour. And winter storm warning, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast for whiteout conditions at times and blowing snow. Otherwise, next front bringing rain and wind into the panhandle. That presses in toward the coast tomorrow, so some pretty good solid rain for the southeast coast and dry over the central and southeast interior areas. And then this storm down here to the south on Wednesday moves northeastward south of the Alaska Peninsula. They'll start increasing wind, rain, and snow for the Kodiak Island area and areas of snow shower southern Alaska, a little bit more widespread on up to the north. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.